I love biting off more than I can chew and then having to figure it out.
Yo, welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting. And you can reach me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is the big 175, episode 175. Thank you very much. And today's guest is Nick Childs. Nick is a child. I just couldn't resist making a joke with his name, but Nick is an unbelievably creative superstar who is the co-founder and chief creative officer at Dirt. Dirt is doing breakthrough things in the consumer research space for advertisers and brands alike using neuroscientific principles. Seriously, it blends market research with neuroscience. It's one of the coolest companies you'll come across. In addition to his Dirt work, see what I did there? Nick has been a chief creative officer, creative director, producer, creative writer, pretty much everything you can imagine for a whole slate of creative advertising agencies. In this episode, we talk how Dirt actually uses those neuroscientific principles, what goes on behind the scenes to create fantastic, iconic Super Bowl ads. And how do you know if you actually love what you do or you're just in it for the results? It is Nick the Childs. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Nick Childs, the creative child. That is officially your name, maybe? No. One of the most creative directors, producers, writers, literally creative directors and co-founders you'll ever come across. Nick, so excited to speak to you today. How you doing?
I am amazing. Thanks, Max. That's a very nice introduction. Probably not one of the most amazing, but I'll take it.
Of course. You're not one of the least amazing. I mean,
I like that. That's going to be the new bio, at least on Twitter. Not the least amazing.
Yeah, exactly. We'll set the bar real high. But we're going to get into what you're up to today with the Dirt, which is some really, really cool stuff that even blends into the neuroscience world. So a little there. But before we do that, what is the secret to pulling off a great Super Bowl ad?
Ooh, I like that one. Just straight out of the gate, firing the hard ones.
Straight to the ooh.
So many answers flying through my head. In the sounding a bit sycophantic, a great client that allows you to
hold on. What does sycophantic mean? That I
like
think I like it.
Sucking up, basically.
Maybe I don't like it.
So a great client who lets you come with, I think, weird, wild, unexpected ideas. To me, nowadays, a great Super Bowl, quote unquote, spot is probably much more a full campaign that wraps around a lot of other platforms with it. So I'm more interested, and have been for years, in the ability to talk with audiences, to engage them, whatever you want to say that kind of is, but that engagement with people across different platforms and not just hitting them with a 30-second or 60-second Super Bowl commercial. I think the real secret is to try to facilitate a conversation for the audience, and then hopefully with the audience bringing the brand in, but really starting something that the audience reacts to positively and emotionally and kind of sparks to and wants to talk about, and then facilitating that conversation across a lot of other platforms. That's interesting now, whether that's Twitter or Twitch or Snap or TikTok, but making sure that you're not just especially spending that kind of money to get a 30 to 60-second flame when you can sustain it a lot longer.
Obviously, there's certain degrees that clients are themselves. Some are more flexible than others. But how do you help clients to just stay open and work with you a little bit on the ideas in order to put together a really great ad?
There's so many amazingly talented people who I honestly say do this better than I did in my past. But I think it goes from the very first engagement with your client, right? Is setting up what your role can be, inviting them into the process, and really showing them why they should do different. Rob Riley, who's now the global head of creativity for WPP. I saw him talk the other night, and he's doing this section of Cannes coming up for the Lions this summer. And it's called the Titanium section. It's basically anything that doesn't fit in the typical ad bucket. For the last couple of decades, they've been rewarding that. And his call to action was to just ask agencies to submit for that award the weirder, most unexpected things. And I think it's not just asking agencies to submit for awards, it's asking people to try and go into rooms with clients, and even into the rooms with yourselves and your teams and inside your agency or inside wherever you work creatively, and allowing the space to bring your weirdest and wildest selves. I'm fascinated now and really excited by the idea of weird being good. I just love that. I think when I was growing up, which was a long time ago as a kid, it feels like when people said normal, it was trying to describe this swath of people that was bigger, right? That there was this huge chunk of society and culture that was called normal, and then there were outliers. I think now, with what's happening in culture and society, first off, there is no normal. It's ridiculous. But even if there is some, it's a much narrower band, and everybody falls on the spectrum somewhere of being abnormal. And abnormal is a wonderful thing, and being weird is a wonderful thing. And the only thing important in any room is the you bring into the room, and that's what makes you tick, and what makes you unique, and what makes you strange and unexpected. And all of those adjectives are words that I would say define creativity and define a good ad. Bring something unique, bring something weird. The more you get aligned with anybody, a patron, a studio, a client in advertising early, so that they allow you to bring unexpected and strange ideas, the closer you're going to be to getting those ideas greenlit. I think it's still really hard as you progress, and certainly in advertising, to keep the weirdness as much as possible, to get those ideas from being greenlit in the room to actually being produced and actually, going live on some platform. But the only success you're going to have is if you start in the very early days with the kind of broadest scope of interesting. And then even if it gets whittled down, you're still going to end up with something at least slightly different. I would always say to myself and to any teams I was working with, at the end of the day, the way I would look at it is, if we produce something that we're unhappy with, or we think is terrible or lame or ridiculous or just a terrible ad, ultimately we're to blame. Ultimately, we put that worst idea in the room. So in a terrible case, let's try to go make our worst viable ad be at least something we want to create.
Make it not the least amazing. I think put that qualifier on there.
It keeps coming back to not being the least amazing.
Well, being weird and wild, there's a weird and wildly beautiful thing about it. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm a big fan of the word wild. It has nothing to do with this podcast or anything. But actually, some of my favorite podcasts to listen to totally embrace the weird. Shout out Kat and Jethro from Box of Oddities. They literally just tell weird stories to one another and embrace being their weird, natural, beautiful self, or freaks, as they say. But it applies to the podcast world. It applies to anything you're consuming in the visual world. If there's something weird and creative and out there, most of the time it just piques your interest and makes you think, and can even make you think about things in a different light. So I'm all about that.
I love that word, freak, and normalizing that, and taking this language and subverting it and pushing it to be something we embrace instead of something we label other people with. I found this simple quote from Janis Joplin the other day, where she says, "I'm one of those regular weird people," and that's just awesome to me. This idea of just normalizing weird. Let's do it.
It is. We're gonna get more and more freaky, and later in this interview, we'll get more and more dirty. So that's where we are.
All right.
On the weird and wild note, there's a wildly different mix of different roles that go into creating like a knockout Super Bowl ad or a short film or any creative production like that. And you've really been in a lot of those different roles. You've been in a lot of different roles. You've seen, what do they say? The sides of the coin. Like you've seen sides of a very, like a dodecagram, if that's even a shape. You've seen, but between production, directing, creative directing, writing, which of those elements of putting together an awesome creative piece really is your favorite all time?
It might sound disingenuous, but like, I don't think I have a favorite of all time. That's not true. I was on set a while back shooting a few commercials, and we walked into a place we were filming for the day, big kind of studio set in a brewery. And my client was standing there already, and it was the crack of dawn, and they were putting up the lights, and I didn't even realize it, but she walked up to me. She goes like, "Why are you smiling so much? You haven't even had coffee yet," or some joke like that. And not even being, a smart ass or trying to overdo it, I just said, I just fucking love being on set. And there is something about that to me that you do find these places where it could be the 48th hour, the 72nd hour of shooting. And time just goes away for me. I love being on set. I love being in the edit room. I love being in production meetings with creative people. I've gotten a lot better at not worrying about my jealousy in those moments, and to feel lucky to be with people who I can immediately realize are more talented in their roles than I could probably ever be. And that serves me. And I think everyone, as you get more experienced and older, but really more experience, is being able to see that roles shift. I'm a pretty tall person, and I played college basketball, but I didn't make it to the pros. And when I'm 6'6", so when you're 6'6", people ask you all the time. Now that I got a lot older, they don't ask me if I'm still playing, but they said, "Did you play basketball?" And you kind of realize that those certain dreams of, playing professional basketball or becoming a world-renowned film director, they might be past you, but you can slowly morph into other roles where you see that you get the same satisfaction out of putting pieces together. So a long-winded way of saying that's the fun part of seeing these different sides of the dodecahedron, or whatever you said is.
Yeah. Oh, I like that better.
I can see these different facets, and I really, really love putting those pieces together. So now what I enjoy more, because I do it more, is kind of the producer role. And that goes over to Dirt too, as a founder, is I'm really interested in the growth of our company, the creative muscle I can bring to it, and working with clients. But there's a lot of other aspects that if you'd asked me 5 or 10 years ago, is this where your career is going to go? And is this what you want to do next? I would have said no, because I would have looked at a client services role or a growth role as being like, oh, I'm doing that inside an agency, and this may not be the place I want to do that. But I happen to be, with this company Dirt we formed, feel very lucky and privileged to be at a place where I love all aspects of that now. So if you'd said to me, will you love learning the deep finance side of it, and how to raise money pieces, and how to go get clients, I would have said, that's probably not what I do, but now it's what I do every day. And I really love it, and I get a ton out of it.
So let's get a little bit dirty in honor of Christina Aguilera. Shout out Christina, longtime listener. But let's get to Dirt, a super cool company that you're a co-founder of. And when somebody hears about a new company focused on research, you might think maybe traditional focus groups or qualitative studies, or for anybody who's worked in CPG, it's like walk around with in-store shopping, things like that.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
with Dirt, you and team are going all in on some neuroscientific principles, neuroscientific research. That's pretty awesome and weird and wild and mind-blowing to me. What are some of the most common ways that you are weaving neuroscience into this research?
Well, neuroscience is at the heart of everything we do. DIRT is actually an acronym, and it stands for Discover and Illuminate Real Truth. And that pushes not how we feel about all other research. I think there's validity, and people, clients, brands, studios all use the kinds of research that you were just mentioning: A/B testing, focus groups, surveys, and they perform for them. But all of those types of research are asking a person or a group of people to tell you their interpretation of how they're responding to anything you put in front of them, right? Whether that's a new packaging or a television commercial, or I've done that in days of working with places like HBO, where we'd have screenings for random strangers, right? And we'd bring them in and they'd watch a movie or a show, and we'd ask them how they feel. But all of that is asking you to interpret your own emotions and your own takeaways from those things. And I think that's obviously colored from your history, how you feel in the moment, a bunch of different things. We use biometric neuroscience, which basically means sensors that we put on you in a variety of different ways to measure how your brain is reacting in the millisecond to all of those stimuli. So all of that same stuff, an ad, a half hour of a television show, a user experience, downloading an app or going through an app. Think about like a car share app as you're dialing in to get a car delivered to you, and the experience of staying in that app while you're waiting for somebody to arrive. Any of those things that you're engaging with, we can put that in front of an audience who is looking at or listening to or watching it, and get a measurement tied to that timeline of what they're doing during that 3 or 5 or 10, 15 minutes, and correlate exactly how their brain was reacting to it emotionally. That's a long way of explaining. Basically, what we do is we see where you're paying attention when, right? We're seeing where your brain is focusing its attention and where it's not focusing its attention. And that, to me, not only is it just super cool seeing how people react to things kind of truly in their mind, and then using those interpretations to help shape the evolution of whatever that thing is to hit the audience next and next and next. So it's a recut of a commercial, or it's a better user experience inside the flow of an app, or it's, releasing a movie and working behind the scenes as you're editing, whatever those things are. That to me is super, super cool. But creatively driving and working with the creative teams, by creative, I mean like everybody from the C-suite down to the actual people who are directing or producing or animating or whatever, showing them where audiences are inarguably not paying attention or where they're losing the attention, and helping them figure out how to make those moments more engaging is, it's just a blast for me creatively. Like, I've always been a person who, whether I'm writing, whether I'm directing, has been interested in using, we'll call it data. It gets dangerous quick because creatives like to say like, well, data, it's just informing my art. It's like, yeah, it's informing your art. How the audience reacts, how people think about it, to me, in the fields that I've chosen to work in, matters a ton. And it's really, really fun to use that research and that data to drive making better work. To me, it's kind of like magic. It's like a trick. If you have that trick of how you can make something better and resonate more, I like having that at my disposal.
It is super cool. I'm ready to put these sensors on right now. I don't think I've ever been like more excited to put sensors on than I have right now.
That's what we hope, right? And it's fun. I mean, part of this too is how we're going to engage the people we're measuring as an audience too. So I can't really get into the details, but instead of just bringing people into a lab and having them sit passively, actually engaging an audience and having a device that can be used often to measure these things, making it fun, making it interesting, making it enjoyable, or at least lucrative for those people to use this device, so that we can get back honest feedback. I mean, my hope is we'll work with all sorts of different clients, again, from studios to brands to creators to, app designers, gaming companies. But my hope is to work with people who really, really want to understand their audiences better, and have a purpose, to use a word that's thrown around way too much in advertising right now, to drive that better connection with audiences. And look, that's what I've been doing my whole career. I've been interested in not just the television commercial or the radio spot or the outdoor billboard, but like what we used to call 10, 15 years ago, transmedia. Like, how do we talk to people across new platforms generally and engage them more? And I've been doing that at work, and I've been doing that outside of work in artistic endeavors too, building experiential, digital driven projects that generally launch at big film festivals like Tribeca and Sundance and the New York Film Festival, and figure out really cool ways that we can engage people unexpectedly and use digital means to drive those experiences, but it's not like VR or AR necessarily. It's not a screen that you put up to then interpret the world around you. It's actually using the digital tools to drive the experience, but a lot of the time it's not seen. So you're using the resources that you have at hand to make those experiences more unexpected and surprising. And what I've found by being able to work, luckily, with like super talented people is when you do that, it is like magic. People don't know how it's happening. They weren't expecting it to, whatever that it is, to happen in that way. And that surprise and that delight and that engagement just makes audiences react more strongly emotionally. And that to me, as a whoever we're talking to right now, as a creator, I feel like that's the drive, right? I always go back to this like idea of the muse sitting on an artist's shoulder. And I think most of the time I think about like painters or artists who have been working alone on their work, and maybe they bring it to the audience, or maybe somebody someday after they dies finds this trove of art and puts it out there. That's a very specific kind of artist. I feel like what we're talking to at Dirt, and certainly what I've been doing in my career across filmmaking and advertising and now neuroscience, is trying to acknowledge that we are engaging audiences, right? That's table stakes. This is what we're trying to do. So as soon as you acknowledge, I want to put butts in seats, whatever form that takes, then that means that you're beholden to understanding what's driving that audience behavior, what puts them in the seat, what keeps them in the seat, what keeps them engaged. And that's the trick, I think, for next steps in this data and information age and going AI, is how do we use the data that we're gathering back and purposefully bring it to the creative side of it, the maker's side of it, the creator economy side of it? How do we give things back to those people who are making these things in a way that's actionable and they can actually use them? That's been the trouble so far. As like a creative lead at agencies, I would get people in the data end coming to me and saying, well, you should do X, Y, and Z. And I would never understand how to bring that to bear. It was, to use a very generic example, somebody would say, well, 3-second ads are better or 10-second ads are better. And I'm like, okay, that's just giving me a timeline. That's not telling me in any way how to make the work better. I guess it's telling me in some way, but it's not telling me in a useful way as a creator. It's not acknowledging that that's not solving my problem creatively. And what I find now, especially at Dirt, is the awesome conversations we're having is when we have everybody from the C-suite to partners to the marketing teams to the actual teams that are creating the work come to the table and all go, holy shit, this stuff is great. I see exactly what we should do next to make this not just better for the audiences, not just better to drive sales, but it makes them more excited. It makes them want to do the next thing because they understand where they should go next.
You mentioned using all of the resources at hand. And in your case with the Dirt, it's literally using resources on people's hands and note from people's hand with those sensors. On the scientific, I'll even go out on a limb and say neuroscientific level, what are these sensors actually measuring?
They are measuring the infinitesimal change in sweat secretion on your fingers. So basically, it's microscopic. It happens in the instant fraction of a second, and your body has a reaction based upon the fight or flight response. This is part of our, evolution forever.
Right.
That measures basically whether something is stimulating you more or less, right? That's what we're using to then correlate to the time trace of what you're paying attention to and say, again, inarguably, this is where your attention is focusing or not focusing. And then you can pull that out and extrapolate out emotion from that moment. One of the ways I think about it is, if you're working at Jordan Peele's production company, Monkey Paw, they make a certain kind of film and project, right? Kind of thriller horror films, or Blumhouse, Jason Blum's company, right? They make horror films pretty much across the board. So if you're seeing spikes in attention by measuring 5 different cuts of a trailer for a new film, we're correlating fear, thrill, emotional responses to that aren't humor, right? but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. What we're showing them is if you side by side those 5 2-minute edits, we're going to be able to give you feedback very quickly that audiences are reacting more or less to each one of those trailers in a way that then allows you to not just rank the trailers and say, this is good or bad, this one's good or bad, we should run this one or that one, but actually we can dig in and find the pieces in each individual one that are resonating. So you could theoretically create a whole new trailer out of whole cloth and bring those best elements to bear. And I think that's the fun part of it, is we're not giving you that emperor's thumbs up or down from dirt. We're not saying this is good or bad. We're saying, here's where you can pay attention next. Now let's go roll up our sleeves and get at that one. And that's a lot of fun.
I saw a term, galvanic skin response. Did I say that right?
You did.
Perfect. I've been practicing my galvanisms. I had never heard that before, but it seems really interesting. What is that?
So that is the process that we were just talking about of hooking up these sensors to your fingers and having a little device that you wear that measures all of that through a computer in a lab.
Perfect. I'm just asking you to give the definition and then asking you to confirm the name of it right after you've said the definition.
That's it, exactly. And we use some other measurement too. And look, I got involved in this because the co-founders that I'm joined up with, Ryan Anthony, who's the CEO, was doing this at a company that was using neuroscience to drive engagement, kind of in a gaming marketing platform. Brendan Murray, who's our chief science officer, has been doing this for a decade plus, kind of at the top of his field, using these biometrics to deliver results kind of across the board, from everything from gaming to studio filmmaking to television to brands. And then Arv Swaminathan, who is the last co-founder, he is also was with Ryan at their previous company and has been kind of building this in the past. So I'm the one who's coming to it more blind than the other three. And I'm trying to add in my experience as a creator, as a maker, as a person who's been a producer and loves to see the process make things better, and then also kind of help steer where all of this can go next and the kind of clients we are going to work with. I just get super excited, as I bet you can tell, of just talking to people about it, because most of the time we just never get a response that somebody's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, most people say like, wow, that's really cool. And they're not coming at it from a fear perspective of, this is some crazy new thing you're doing that I don't quite believe in. Again, I'm just trying to make it additive. We're just trying to make it additive. If you're doing A/B testing, if you're doing surveys, if you're doing these kinds of things in focus groups, wouldn't you want to at least add in, this is what your brain's doing, right? This is what you think you reacted to. Don't you also want to know what their brain was actually reacting to in the moment? Like, even just being able to put those two sources of data next to each other at the end of the day is fascinating, because they'll either correlate and support one another, or they'll give you some really interesting moments of friction where you can kind of look at things. And look, at the end of the day, for me, from a creative perspective, all of this is to drive a better process for the people making stuff. That's the goal here, is to excite the makers so that they have information at their fingertips that is actionable and gives them a return on exactly what they want to do next. So it's actionable. Like, I know what to do coming out of this meeting or coming out of seeing this research. I know how it's going to impact what I'm making and how to use it to make that stuff better. And I'm going to, after I release this into the world, be able to see how the audience did react more favorably, more strongly to it. So as long as we stay honest and kind of authentic to those two measurements, and that's what we're really doing, I get up every day and I'm pretty excited about the promise of what we're building.
We're talking about neuroscience, and you read my mind somehow. Like, I think there's some weird juju going on here where you can just tell what I'm going to ask, because I was literally thinking the word actionable, in a split second later you were like, actionable. And that's my biggest question with all this is, what's the best way clients, whether it be agencies or brands, can take this research and insight that you and the Dirt team are putting together and actually help them flourish with creative marketing campaigns?
Being open to what it's showing you. That's that's actually a really boring response. From the maker perspective, from the brand perspective, from the creator perspective, it's actually really simple. There's a fiction writer, George Saunders, who is kind of inarguably one of the top, if not the top, short story and fiction writers in America. He has this really cool thing going on online right now called the Story Club, where he's basically doing what he did in his last book, which he broke down several different short stories. He's also a professor at Syracuse, and he broke down what he does in class, several short stories and how they work and how they function. And he's doing this story club for, I think there's thousands of us taking it online, and it's just super fun. He's doing the same thing. He's taking a story. This is the first one is a Ernest Hemingway story, and he's breaking it down and kind of showing how it works and what it inspires him, and giving some writing exercises. And in one of his early newsletter notes, he wrote that he wished he had a fiction machine, which is something he could hook up to 20 or 100 readers and understand exactly the parts that they were reacting to and the parts that they weren't reacting to, and use that to then help him revise his work. And I was just blown away. Here's a guy I'm following and a course I'm taking because I just love writing, and he's super cool and it's interesting and fun. And he's describing basically what we can do at Dirt. And for me, the point he made in that newsletter was most interesting, because his takeaway wasn't that you would take what those 100 people had been paying attention to and have to do what they wanted. You would simply, as the writer, be seeing where they were paying attention and where they were not paying attention. And now it was up to you to go do what you wanted as you revised. And that, to me, nails it. It's like what we're giving back to clients is not a prescriptive way that they have to go remake. It's we're giving you, to use that trite word in advertising, actionable ways that you get to go back.
I was just thinking that word.
Yeah. It's like, that's the cool part to me. That's the fun part to me. Like I go back to writers a lot, because that's where, I did that as a graduate degree in fiction writing. And Elmore Leonard, I don't know if you know him, but he's written a ton of books, and he made Justified, the TV show, and a bunch of stuff. Out of Sight, Get Shorty was all made from his books. And he has these 10 rules of writing that I use all the time, because the 10th rule of basically how to write, and these are things like, don't describe the weather and only use the verb said to carry dialogue, like basic, really cool ideas. The 10th and most important a rule on his list is try to leave out the part that readers skip. Try to leave out the part that readers skip. And they're like, yeah, I mean, I've loved Elmore Leonard my entire life. And I'm like, Elmore's just channeling what I get to do now, is help people figure out the parts that people aren't paying attention to, and try to make your work more interesting for yourself and for them.
Very interesting. If you have an interesting idea for a podcast, but you haven't let that interest be known publicly yet, I can help you do so. Hit me up at max@maxpodcasting.com. I will help you get over that hump, actually create these podcast episodes, actually get them out into the world, and actually add that new audio dimension to your business. Email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to help you save time with your high-quality podcast. Now, let's get into the neuro of Nick. And yes, that is alliteration. So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get into the mind of Nick, which is always a scary thing. I mean, who knows? No, I'm just kidding. No, but inspiration, creativity, kind of you as a person. What helps you stay creative as a writer?
Jealousy, reading things, watching things, seeing shows go into development that I wish I could be part of, and just go like, I wish I could do that. And then realizing that's okay, that the world isn't binary. It's not a zero-sum game. It's awesome that people are doing amazing things. And then that kind of goes from being jealous and excited by and just in awe of the output that people have, whether that's art, whether that's writing, whether that's film, in business, anything, right? Games, but taking that down to the level of the people who are actually doing it. So like, I think the thing that truly inspires me every day now is using places like Twitter or the web to find newsletters or people who are engaging with their audiences and communities in really interesting ways and feeding out great links and great ideas every week. So, the people who inspire me now are all over the board. Austin Kleon, who's written several different books, and Show Your Work is one of them. He has an amazing newsletter that comes out every Friday morning that just always has 2 or 3 ridiculously cool things in it. Minda Harts is a writer, African-American writer, who's just written some amazing books, and the way she engages on Twitter with her community, just the people she connects with and shouts out to, I find are fascinating people to follow. There's a woman named Laura Olin, Olin, and her newsletter every week is just like, it's just full of stuff you should see. I sometimes when I was interviewing people for roles in creative agencies, I would just early days, I would throw out, hey, what are you interested in by right now? Like, what's creatively driving you? And I realized that's not the best way to do something in an interview, because especially for junior roles, people felt, I could kind of see the panic in their eyes. They're like, oh, wait, is he waiting for the coolest thing? Is he going to judge me if it's not something really esoteric and edgy? And I literally just wanted them, Max, to tell me, like, what's something cool? It could be like, oh, I saw this thing at a museum, or it could be like, I saw this crazy thing on this piece of art on the side of a wall, or I was just reading this book, or, oh man, have you seen the last episode of Succession yet? That was awesome. Like, it could be anything. And I was trying to get to basically asking what drives you, and it was challenging for them. So like, I'm much more, I'm following a lot of people now to scrape what satisfies their curiosity and what inspires them. And I find out a lot of those kind of people on Twitter and different places and through newsletters are sharing just amazing stuff that's so much more creatively driven than I am at heart. And it's like, I post this sometimes, I'm like, yeah, anytime you think you're creative, here, look at this, here, look at this. And like, once you open your eyes to, you don't have to be professional, you don't have to be making a ton of money out of it, you don't have to be doing it every day. Look at this, look at this, look at this. You realize how surrounded we are by amazing people and incredible ideas everywhere, every day.
Yeah, and there's like literally a whole world of things that you wouldn't even consider, and then you come across and it just totally rocks your world. Like, we had on Willard Wiggin, who's the world's tiniest micro sculptor, and he
Oh, that's so
creates
cool.
he creates these sculptures, and they're beautiful, and they're like, they literally fit in the eye of a needle. Like, they're microscopic, you can't see them with the naked eye, and it's just it amazes. Like, that applies to the creative world as well. So you can always go deeper, you can always go smaller, you can always go bigger. There's so much you can unleash in
I
this
love
world
that
of
you just
creativity.
went to bigger too, right? Because you gave a shout
Yeah.
out to Christina Aguilera earlier. Like, yeah, yeah. Look, it's okay. It's wonderful. It's fucking amazing to be inspired by. He just comes top of the mind because of his death a couple of weeks ago. But Virgil Abloh, like, it's okay
Yeah.
to say, yeah, I'm inspired by Virgil Abloh, or I'm inspired by Chadwick Boseman, two people who kept doing their art all the way through, not even kind of sharing with the public or anybody outside their most innermost circles what they were dealing with, all to the last moment that they could. Or a poet like Mary Oliver. Like, Mary Oliver, like, she's, a lot of people love her work, and it's okay for me to love Mary Oliver as a poet, or like Chloe Zhao, right, who directed Nomadland and did The Rider and then did Eternals for Marvel. Like, this is a young woman who is now the second woman to win the Oscar for Best Directing. To see her come from Beijing in her late teens or early 20s and move herself to America and go to high school alone while living alone in LA, and just do what she does every day in a way that isn't traditionally rewarded inside the Hollywood system. And to watch her go from making these intimate films to winning an Oscar to directing a Marvel thing. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Be inspired by Chloe. Anytime you think it's tough for you, it is tough. It is. Acknowledge that things are hard and it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, but also understand that there is no given path. One of my friends that I mention all the time told me that, kind of, if there's a quote I live by, he gave it to me, and he didn't even intend it to be big in my life, but one day he just told me, kind of, talking about something totally off the cuff. He said, "Stop making up rules." And that has stuck with me like forever, ever since he told it to me a decade plus ago. It was like, there are rules, there's ways to go about things, but it's gonna keep you in a box. And the more you realize that those rules are in your head, and you know, you can go do what you want as long as you release yourself from the next steps, right? It may not make a ton of money. It may not be the career that takes off for you. That all those extra steps, I think, are what keep us kind of shackled in our creative ideas. It's not that we can't do the creativity. It's not that we think we can't write a book or draw a comic or make a piece of music. It's that we think, if I record that track on my home audio system, I want it to get 1 million downloads on Spotify. That's the tricky leap, right? Is oh, if I'm going to write this book, I better win an award for it. Like, whoa, wait a second. Is it the doing the art, or is it being the artist? And that's, I was talking to somebody the other day about that. That's a great question, I think, creatively for us to ask ourselves all the time is, do you want to be a writer, or do you want to write? That usually keeps me pretty grounded in being okay with the decisions I've made to not do things, right? So I did a graduate degree in fiction writing, and I got feedback that I was pretty good at it. I didn't keep writing, right? That's the reason I'm not a writer more than anything else. It's not that my writing's good or bad, it's that I don't write all the time. So I think being honest with ourselves about what we're chasing creatively is a really important thing too, and to probably focus on the things that you're getting positive feedback on before you take the next steps.
Well, speaking of out of the box, let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout Out of the Week.
The Wild Business Shout Out of the Week!
Thank you. I've worked very hard on that. I've been debating if I want to be a harmonica player or just play harmonica. It's kind of an important distinction.
I think it's important to ask the kind of feedback you're getting. If people are, if you're doing a lot of harmonica playing and people say, wow, you've got something here, then I think by all means that's a dream you need to pursue.
Absolutely. It's harmonious. But out of the box, there's a really cool ad from Burberry. Is it Burberry or Burberry? I don't know how to
I'm going to say
pronounce.
It's Burberry, just so everybody gets mad and corrects us online.
Perfect. All right. So Blueberry had a really a really awesome ad dealing with open spaces. Can you share what that is and why it struck you?
Yeah, it just blew me away because it's beautiful. Like, honestly, that's what it is. And it hit all the aspects for me of, like, sometimes in advertising, you're like, oh, this is almost a short film. I'm like, it's not a short film, it's an ad. Burberry has been doing these kinds of, I guess, annually, they shoot a kind of bigger spot. And this one, pretty sure if you look up open spaces, it'll pop up, but it's Burberry's big ad it just features 4 people, super cool looking, millennial or younger, amazing, gorgeous models driving into a wheat field somewhere stunningly beautiful. And they get out of their car and they're, of course, dressed in super slick, cool Burberry stuff that makes you love the brand. But there's no branding. And then they walk into the wheat field and all of a sudden the wind sweeps down out of the sky and it picks them up. And I won't ruin any more of it because everybody needs to see it. And the part for me was, I loved it. I thought it was cool. I posted it to Twitter, and what I saw in the feedback online very quickly was what I had thought I noticed alone, which is, I don't know if you've ever had this, Max, but like when I have dreams of flying, I don't have dreams about flying. I have dreams that I'm walking down a city street and I push off the ground and suddenly I'm able to float 50 or 100 feet and kind of bounce and stay in the air longer. But I've never, I don't remember having dreams about flying. I have dreams about that kind of leaping. And that's what Burberry nailed. And I was like, it's like they got inside my head. And I thought I was the only one who had that. And then I saw online a lot of people reacting. It was like, this is what I think about when I think about flying. And I was like, wow, that to me is the definition of creativity that makes me super jealous. And I remember this from bear with me here for 1 minute. I remember this from writing school where a guy who was in one of my writing classes, and yep, turns out he was not only one of the best writers I've ever known, but went on to win the Pulitzer Prize for his work later on. But in one short story that he wrote in a class decades ago, he described one of the characters watching another character leave the house. And I think the way that he wrote it with this one sentence was, as she was watching him go away, she put her head against the window glass and felt that cool pocket of air that sits just off the surface. And I remember reading that sentence and going, Jesus Christ, that's something I've always felt when you put your face close to a pane of glass, but I've never heard anybody talk about it before. And like, that's that moment in the Burberry spot or anything that just gets me and gets me excited that way, is they've nailed something that is a kind of communal truth, but I haven't seen anybody explain it before. And it just kind of brings you in and yeah, blew me away.
There's something that always amazes me about like this brand, strawberry, blackberry, raspberry. They have this iconic pattern that's been around. I don't know when they were founded, but I would imagine quite a high number of years, a large number of years. And you think if you just have the same pattern, the same look over time, it would get kind of stale, but they've continually found ways through advertisements like this to bring new life to it and to intrigue and attract people. And it's no question why it worked for so long for them.
Yeah, it's so cool. It resonates with me in so many ways. And the fundamental way for me is, one of them is to just always be aware that you have a choice. You have a choice to see things differently. If you're working with a pattern that's been around for decades or 100 years, Tiffany's doing it right now. They're trying to kind of reinvent themselves for a new generation. It's, yeah, you can do that. You can do that. It's all obviously how you do it, but it starts with giving yourself the freedom, going back to the beginning of what we're talking about. Be weird. Doing it unexpectedly as opposed to just kind of trying to shave the edges off is a way more interesting way at it.
So let's weirdly wrap this up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's get wild. Let's get weird too. Why not?
All right. I think I'm ready. Now I'm nervous.
Okay, I'm just going to awkwardly pause to make you more nervous. No. Your work has been at Sundance, Tribeca. What's your favorite part of film festivals?
That the audience really is there to see weird things. And the more you embrace the idea that you're going to see some stuff that may never make it to the big screen or that none of your friends will ever see, that's kind of the cool part of it. So embracing the unexpected. I really love the festivals that just, you could kind of back in the day more than now with the crowds and the ticketing, and certainly with COVID and stuff, but you could just wander into a theater and see something that you never would have gone out of your way to see if you were paying, 10, 15, $20 for a movie ticket. That's my favorite part of the kind of festival experience.
And what's a pet peeve you have? Something, it could be about anything, big or small, but something that just grinds your gears a little bit.
For me, and I'm going to take it personally here and kind of say what I hold out against myself, is this idea that you can't do something. It goes back to a little bit of what I was saying earlier, this kind of binary or zero sum game. I have a pet peeve in myself when I, especially with creative things, see something somebody's done and feel like, oh, that's been done, I can't do it. And allow myself to give myself that kind of cushion of setback to say like, okay, well, you missed out there. And the truth is, you haven't. The world is waiting for whatever you have to give it next. I think audiences, understanding that audiences are there to be surprised and shocked and support you, is a really good way at life. So the pet peeve for me is that I guess that's kind of imposter syndrome and not deserving it. I let myself live far too much of my creative life thinking I couldn't do things than I could. And so that's my own personal pet peeve.
Beautifully said. And you definitely could. You definitely can. You definitely have. So that's, I think you're just extremely humble as well. But
yeah. I mean, thank you. But I also think you get extremely frustrated by things and then you try to work for perfection. And that's another pet peeve, is perfect instead of good enough. Get shit out into the world that's good enough and then you can adjust it. But the important thing is to get it out there.
What's your favorite and least favorite part of being 6'6"? Just first thing that comes to your head.
Oh, It used to be everybody saying, "Oh, look how tall you are," right? And then I kind of turned that around. I was like, "Okay, that's just an obvious observation." I think the
But people
truth
are
is,
so
it's like
brilliant.
it's all privilege, right? You start to look at things and you go, "Oh, maybe they aren't saying something rude. Maybe they're actually saying." Wow, that's cool that you're that tall. And so again, taking it from the positive side, trying to take things from a positive spin has been good. Look, it let me play basketball better than I would have if I'd been shorter.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I can reach things off the top shelf for my wife who's not quite as tall as me. Like, I guess that's a terrible answer, but yeah.
No, that's amazing. As someone who's 7 foot, no, I'm just kidding. And then last one, you worked on the famous E-Trade baby ads, which is I still remember to this day. I mean, it had very long life. I mean, that baby's probably grown up and reaching for tall things on shelves by now. But
baby has a, as I always joke, the baby has a reality show somewhere about like the downfall of his life.
oh my God. But what's something about the E-Trade baby that you think most people would be surprised by?
Well, I'd be surprised if most people remember that campaign now. I think that's part of
Oh no!
advertising.
See, you're just
we go
so
back
humble.
and we go back and we like, wow, that was a long time ago. I mean, do people even see ads anymore? That's a whole different discussion for different times. But yeah, I'll tell you a fun story about that. Is originally when we were going to shoot it, it's shot as if the baby's talking into a webcam. And remember, this is a decade plus ago, right? So we didn't have Zoom and easy stuff like that really worked. So webcams were super glitchy. And we proposed and really wanted to shoot the baby with a real webcam. And I was down in the weeds of being like, and this is the kind of webcam that the baby would have on this kind of a computer. And we actually shot some of the spots in the overall campaign, which was people in everyday life signing up for E-Trade because it was so easy, kind of a baby could do it. And we did shoot them with one camera facing them in one take. But for the baby, it quickly escalated to, no, this is a big spot. It might be for the Super Bowl. We have to go have trucks and trucks of lighting and find a location and find the baby and shoot him with the most high resolution cameras you possibly can and do all of that, which, you know, if you've worked in advertising, things can escalate really quickly. And then we spent a ton of time in post-production glitching that up so it looked like you took it from an old Samsung phone back in the 2000s. So that's like a fun behind the scenes. It's pretty obvious to people in production of how wacky things get, but it also, you know, it speaks to that, you know, that creative thing of you can have an idea to do things fast and furious and cheap and out of control, and that's scary for a lot of people, and they very quickly can escalate to making sure you have all of your bases covered and everything's perfect, and then, you know, trash it later on.
That I love the wacky behind the scenes. That's perfect. Very cool. I'm nostalgic about this glitchy baby now. But Nick, thank you so much for sharing your creative, curious, neuroscientific insights and everything you've done in your career and are up to now. Just absolutely love what you do. Really, really appreciate it. Where is the best place for people to learn more about what you're doing at Dirt and learn more and connect with you personally?
You can find Dirt at wearedirt.com. And you can find me probably easiest, get in touch on Twitter at Nick Childs. We're just go down a rabbit hole in the web, plug my name in, and you'll probably find some flautist somewhere, some weird things, and then eventually find your way to me, like way, way down on the search engine.
I did not expect a buzzer beater flautist reference.
Yes,
gotta throw that in there. Here we are. And last thing, final thoughts. It could be your favorite quote, a line, whatever you want. Send us home here.
It's Jordan Peele. Shout back to Jordan Peele from earlier. I love biting off more than I can chew and then having to figure it out.
Figure it out. A fantastic show from Nickelodeon lore. Who says Nickelodeon lore? Thank you so much, Nick, for sharing your creativity, curiosity, creative writing, directing, production, neuroscience tips. And thank you, Wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite app and tell a friend about the podcast. You can also, in addition to leaving 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, which some of you know about that, you can also do so now on Spotify. Crazy the technology you kids have these days. You can also find us on Good Pods, where you can check out awesome podcast recommendations from really cool podcast people. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!